All right, now we are on another interesting chapter, 7. We're going to dive into memory. Okay, so super interesting case. This is a case of Clive Waring. This is a vignette in the book. Normally I skip those, but this is a really interesting one that I do like. So I do often in my classes talk about Clive Waring. So 1985, he and his wife Deborah, just living the dream, living their life, and he developed a brain infection. It's a form of viral encephalitis that almost took his life, but sometimes, people think that it's actually worse because he ended up recovering physically, but his memory was never the same. In fact, he is one of the case histories where his attention span is very, very short. And he's very interesting because he had a love for piano and music, and he was able to retain his procedural memories, things that he could do automatically, but he couldn't remember, parts of his life and his family. So, but the one thing he never forgot was his wife. So I'm going to show you this video, just a short little video about Clive Waring's story.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
One man is consigned to live entirely within the present, with terrible consequences. Clive Waring has the worst case of amnesia ever known. 20 years ago, he lost his memory, and now his wife, Deborah, is the only person he recognizes.
Clive really only has less than 30 seconds memory. And sometimes it's as little as perhaps 7 seconds. It's as little as a sentence.
I'm going to see your sister, Adele. Her daughter's got married recently
I see.
in New Zealand.
Ah,
And so they're having a party.
funny how the ladies acquire a different title when they get married.
Do you know who I'm going to see tomorrow?
Buckingham Palace.
No, really guess.
I don't know.
You don't know? Adele.
Oh, I see.
Do you know why I'm going?
No.
She's having a party at her house tomorrow.
It's her birthday, isn't it?
No.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
No.
It's to do with her daughter.
I see.
Do you know
Why?
why her daughter's having a party?
No.
Guess.
No, I don't.
She's just got married.
Oh, I see.
She just got married in... Do you know what country she just got married in?
No, I don't.
In New Zealand.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
The sentence he is in, he will probably have forgotten the sentence before. You ask him a question, and he'll give you an answer. But while he's giving you the answer, he's already forgotten the question. That's how short it is.
I'm going to see your kids tomorrow.
You see my kids?
Yeah, your children.
What are they up to now?
Do you know what they're up to
No,
now?
no.
Guess what you think they're up to.
No idea. I couldn't guess. I don't know what their O-levels were. They hadn't got an O-level last time I was conscious. So I don't know what possible thing they could do, did I?
No.
No, I couldn't possibly guess.
Where do you think they are?
No idea. I don't know where I am.
No.
All he has
Well.
is void behind him.
It's been like death. I've never seen a human being before. Never had a dream or a thought. The brain has been totally inactive. Day and night the same. No thoughts at all. As far as I'm concerned, the doctors have been totally incompetent. I've never seen a doctor the whole time. Oh, look, it's come. Oh, you're wonderful.
That's a very musical kiss. I'm dizzy. I don't know which part of the room I'm standing in.
How many dogs?
Hi, Sam Barker here from...
So it kind of reminds me of that movie 50 First Dates. Has some similarities to it. But yeah, pretty sad case. He's really living in the moment. So when you hear that, just live in the moment, he literally is just living in the moment. All right, so, forgot about this. All right, so what I want you to do is just, when I go to the next slide, just kind of say to yourself or say out loud all the letters that you see. There's my dog growling in the back. Murr. Okay, so I did that. I stopped, or I let that go too long. So if I were to ask you if you were in class, I would say, okay, now go ahead and write down in order all of those letters. And I have yet to get a student to be able to actually get them down all right. So if I did it like this, and said, okay, now go ahead and read that, and then I went away and asked you to write the letters down, then chances are you would remember them. And that's because our memory in our brain cannot process a string of letters. Oh, my dog. They can't process all of those strings of letters because our brain only remembers like chunks of information, which is why you can memorize like your phone number, social security number, maybe your driver's license number, because they're chunked out. It's like dot 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 dot, or you know, dun 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 dun. So when your brain sees X, all these letters that make sense, and X, then your brain can visually process that. Okay, so introduction to memory. So in that vignette, in that story, you know, he had viral encephalitis, and that, you know, encephalitis, millions of people carry herpes simplex virus type 1. For a small minority of the adult population, the virus invades the central nervous system and causes a life-threatening infection. And sometimes due to those infections, memory loss can be one of those outcomes. And again, like all chapters, as you see, here we go talking about a brain part again. And so this is the inflamed area of the temporal lobe, which is where your you know, your memories are contained. Your hippocampus, amygdala, they're all stored in the temporal lobe. Okay, so memory is the process involved in the encoding, storage, and retrieval of information. So the three parts to memory is you encode. So that goes in, and then based on if the information is worth saving, if it's important to you, then it gets stored either short term or long term. And then later on down the road, whether it's, you know, days, weeks, years, then there's that retrieval. Metaphor likens the brain's memory system to a computer. Not completely understood, but a basic agreement on general processes involved. Memory is a very complex kind of phenomenon to understand. All right, so memory's general processes, encoding, storage, retrieval. So when you're encoding, this is when information, like right now, is going inside. And you're either in working memory, sensory memory. It just depends on what your brain kind of sifts through and decides to keep and discard. So occurs when stimuli associated with events are converted to neural activity that travels to the brain. So it's like coming in, and then it's like going zzz, 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 and deciding where it wants to go. Involves two possible paths: memory system entry or loss of stimuli. Now you have storage, preserving information for possible recollection in the future. So it's either going to get stored for a little bit, or it's going to get stored long term. And then retrieval, accessing information encoded and stored in memory. You've got shallow, notice some physical features. You've got intermediate, notice patterns and a little more detail. And then you've got your deep memory, think about meaning. So this is, whoa, okay. I didn't darken this. I don't know what's going on here. You've got your levels of processing framework. Processing of information can occur along a continuum. Again, you've got your shallow, your intermediate, and your deep. So you've got your stages of memory. You've got your sensory memory. It's basically working in the senses, like right then and there. your short-term memory, which lasts up to 30 seconds. And then you've got your long-term memory, which goes on, days, weeks, years, infinity. Each stage of memory has a certain type of storage. So your sensory memory holds a lot of information for just a very short amount of time. You've got your short-term memory, temporarily maintain, process limited information for longer periods, but it's only about 30 seconds. And that's only if there are no distractions. And this happens, if you notice, think about your day-to-day activities when you're walking to the store, you're walking into a meeting, or you're going somewhere. That stuff that's going on in that moment is going to only go into your short-term memory. It's not going to stay long-term. But your long-term is unlimited. It can hold information for the rest of your life. Of course, if there's no damage done to your brain. All right, so you're in your stages of memory, we've got iconic memory, visual impressions that are photograph-like in their accuracy, but dissolve in less than a second. Your eidetic memory is ability to see an image or object sometimes long after it has been removed from sight with amazing specificity. So your eidetic memory is something that you've seen something and you can kind of just visualize that image even though that it's not there. And some people don't have that capacity to visualize. There is a disorder, I don't know, it's not a psychological, but it's a disorder that you don't have that ability to imagine. And then echoic memory, exact copies of the sounds we hear, and that lasts for about 1 to 10 seconds. So your short-term memory stage, second stage of the information processing model. Again, what you want to know, it lasts about 30 seconds. Maintenance rehearsal is a way to kind of help that. That's a technique of repeating information to be remembered. So it increases the length of time that you're going to remember that in short-term memory. But it does not work if you're distracted. So it's kind of like you're in that, stage, you're trying to remember something, somebody kind of grabs your attention and you're like, what was I just talking about? What was I just talking about right now? Yeah, I don't remember. I got distracted. Okay. When we look at chunking, you've got over to the right, we're chunking in numbers. This is an example of a digit span test. The digit span test is part of the Wechsler test, and it's used. There is no true measure of diagnosing ADHD, but the digit span test is used as a sub-test to look at people with potential ADHD and helping as a diagnosis, because it's easier for a person with ADHD to remember digit forward. So they can go, if I say 2, 3, 9, 0, because you have to do it in a monotone voice, then the person with ADHD can do 2, 3, 9, 0, and they can do 4, 5, 7, 9, 1. They can do these things. Obviously, it gets a little more difficult here, but then if you ask them to go digit backwards and do 0, 9, 3, 2, then it's going to, or you say this, 2, 3, 9, 0, and then they have to say 0, 9, 3, 2. It's very hard for somebody with ADHD to kind of go in and out. So they have more difficulty going backwards because they process things forwards, not back. All right, we're not collaborating. All right, so your working memory, active processing of information in short term, includes maintenance and manipulation of information. This helps us accomplish those complex tasks that we have to do in our day. Again, this is your sensory, short term and long term. These are things that are going on in that. So you've got your visuospatial sketch pad, you've got your episodic buffer, and then you've got your phonological loop. These are all things you learn when you're younger. All right, your 4 components of working memory. You've got your phonological loop that was on the page before, these 4 things, your visuospatial sketch pad, central executive, and your episodic buffer. So your phonological loop is loop is responsible for working with verbal information for just really short periods of time. Your visuospatial, again, visual, where your visual and spatial data are briefly stored and manipulated. Your central executive directs attention, makes plans, and coordinates your activities. And your episodic buffer is kind of that bridge between your memory and then your conscious awareness. All right, social media and psychology, multitasking and memory. Various studies have linked media multitasking with diminished academic performance because, again, anything with like social media and academics, they don't go well together. That's why if you're studying or doing homework, you need to have what is called social media breaks. So where you break and you give yourself like a 30 minutes or an hour, then you go back to your studying. Many of these studies are correlational. And again, correlational does not mean causation. How does this inform our understanding of the research findings? That's a question that they are always aiming to answer. Controlled experiments do suggest that digital distractions have the potential to impair memory and learning. Social media may impose a threat to working memory because, again, what I said in the last chapter is your brain needs to process and remember things long term. But when we're giving it what it wants, like in the here and now, our brain does not hold or retain that information because it doesn't have to. Okay. Moving on, you've got your more to do with your memory. You've got your explicit and your implicit. There's a lot of explicit and implicit terms. Think of your explicit is always like your extra. It's your out there. And your implicit is implied. It's kind of within. So explicit memory, type of memory you are aware of because it's outside. It's out there. You can consciously express this in words, declare, including your memories of facts and experiences. This is why you can just say, the capital of Florida is Tallahassee. You know these memories, you've learned them. They're stored in your long-term conscious and explicit memories. Then you have your implicit memories. Those are things that you know how to do, like your procedural things. They may be automatic, unconscious, and difficult to bring to awareness and express. Then you've got your semantic memory. That's your memory of information theoretically available to anyone. Those pertain to your general facts about the world. So things that are going on in the world, things that you know about the world. Those are meanings. Those are what are called your semantic memories. And then your episodic memories are just that, episodes. So the record of memorable experiences or episodes, including when and where an experience occurred. Then your flashbulb memories, those are memories that you know the detail of them. They're very emotionally significant. Usually they're historical events. You can recall where you were at the time that event occurred. There's inaccuracies in that, especially with lacking detail. So an example of the question is, note that a flashbulb memory is a specific type of episodic memory of the experiences associated with learning about an event rather than firsthand memories of experiencing that. So good example of today's time, and you can think of your own memories. For me would be 9/11. So 9/11 is a flashbulb memory. It is a memory that I know exactly where I was. I didn't experience it. I wasn't there. You might relate to a memory like the Pulse shooting. You weren't there maybe, but you know exactly what you were doing, what happened when you learned about those events. Sandy Hook shooting, like I said, 9/11, different types of world specific things that you just know where you were at that time. Your implicit memory, memory for something you know or know how to do, which again, Clive Waring, his procedural memory, his implicit memory was intact. He was able to still remember how to play the piano. These are things like remembering how to ride a bike, tying your shoe, things like that. This is a type of implicit memory. And so question is that you could think of, what kind of procedural memories do you have that, things that are, if you didn't do this for years, you would still be able to go back and do those things. Mnemonics, know what mnemonics are. There are different types of mnemonic devices. You've got your first letter technique. You've got your acronyms, chunking that I showed you before, method of loci. So mnemonic device, where a person visualizes items to be learned with landmarks in some familiar place. This works really well with list. These are mnemonic devices like Roy G. Biv. This was given to remember the colors of the rainbow. And then the music notes, every good boy does fine. So improving your hierarchy, creating hierarchies using effortful processing, elaborative rehearsal, visualization, and distributed practice. So improving your memory, these are the things that you can do. Make sure you get enough sleep. Make sure, your sleep is adequate. Get sleep before you learn something new, because then you're going to remember it longer. Get sleep after you learn something new. It's going to retain it. Sleep deprivation associated with increased risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. Impact of sleep deprivation, staying up all night can interfere with your learning. And because your concentration, your cognitive abilities are lessened. Sleep can increase durability of memories for fear-laden events. And sleep can reduce the strength of emotional reactions to events. All right, we're going to skip that. Elephants are extremely amazing creatures at remembering. All right, so know the difference between recall, recognition. Recall is more difficult because you're pulling that out of long-term memory. Those are like your fill-in-the-blank responses. It's more difficult than recognition. So an example would be short answer test question. And then your recognition is a little bit, easier, matching incoming data to information stored in long-term memory. So both are long-term, but recognition is easier. Have to identify information rather than come up with the information. So it's kind of like, okay, you see that, oh, I can plug that together versus, oh, I got to pull this out of recall. So multiple choice test questions are a good example of recognition. When looking at serial position effects, we see primacy and recency. So basically what they're saying is that you're going to remember more of the things that you learned earlier and later. So primacy, like think about like primary school, earlier, long time ago. And then recency is what you learned last. It's the most recent thing you've learned. And then down here in the middle, all of the things that you learn, these are the things that you more or so forget. So you remember the first and the last, but kind of forget the middle stuff. So if I were to ask you, okay, go ahead and look at all those, words and take, 15 seconds and read them. So then if I were to ask you, okay, get out a sheet of paper and now write down all of those words that you remember from first to last. And what happens if we go back, a lot of people remember candle, maple, subway, sometimes even poison, and then they'll remember like mountain, dollar, wagon, and doorbell. So they'll remember like the first and like the last. What happens in the middle a lot is sometimes people remember some of the words in here, but these get kind of blurred out. So people might mistake lawyer and say attorney. They might ocean and they might instead write beach. Sofa might be misinterpreted and they write down couch. So the things that go into memory are kind of like, okay, what was that? And then it gets kind of switched around. All right. We're going to skip over this. We can skip over. I remember skipping over a lot of these things, so we're not going to really go over them. Learning, Ebbinghaus, know this. So he was the first one to quantify kind of retrieval and memory and acquiring this exposure to, what you're going to remember, in the beginning and what you're going to remember in the end, and kind of relearning things. So this kind of L-shaped thing, this is the forgetting curve, which is what I want you to know. So immediately after learning something, 80% or 100%, then like within an hour, this is how far it goes down. And then days after learning, you see it just dramatically declines. So if it's not something important to you, then you're going to, increasingly forget it soon. All right. You've got your proactive and your retroactive interference. So your proactive tendency for information learned in the past to interfere with the retrieval of new material. I was going to say information. And then retroactive, think of retro before, tendency for recently learned information to interfere with the retrieval of things learned in the past. And this goes with retrograde amnesia and anterograde, which I'll show you very soon. So here is a kind of just a visual. Proactive interference. Old information interferes with newly learned interference. So you've got your old information, Spanish, interference with Italian, and then you go and you fail the Italian test because it's interfering with the old stuff. And then retro is the opposite. So you've got your new information interferes with your information learned in the past. So you've got you're going backwards, and then you failed the Spanish test. So it's just kind of like going the opposite way. All right, so, there is a really cool, it's not her. Her name is Jill, and her story is actually crazy. It reminds me of this vignette, but there was a woman, her name was Jill, and I usually show this video in class, but she has an autobiographical memory and she can't forget anything. So she has an extraordinary memory. If you were in 2021, but if someone just pulled like April 2nd, 1991, she could go back in her visual and that blah, 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 blah memory. I'm trying to think. And she can tell you like what show was playing, what happened in that show. And you might think that it's really cool, but she also was very happily married, lost her husband, and that memory doesn't ever fade or go away. She relives that day every day over and over and over again because she can't forget it. So sometimes you're like, I wish I could forget something, and she literally can't. Misinformation effect. They're really cool study by Elizabeth Loftus. She does eyewitness accounts of accidents. There's a TED Talk I show. It's about false memories and perceptions of certain words that you say. If you say like crash versus ran into, she looked at these studies where if you use the leading question, with crash, you're going to state that the person was going faster than they really were because of the leading word that was used. So her studies on reliability of memory are fascinating. All right, let's see. We're going to move on. This is another one of these studies on memory, on false memories. Would you believe that looking at a Photoshop picture can lead to creation of a false memory? In one study, it was discovered that participants could remember hot air balloon rides they never took after looking at doctored photos of themselves as children on balloon rides. It's very interesting how suggestive our memory is when told false information. Okay, so debate over repressed childhood memories. Based on research, APA released a position statement with its findings. The repressed memory debate should not detract from childhood sexual abuse issues. Most victims of sexual abuse have at least some memory of the abuse, even if it's in their long-term repressed unconscious memory. Memories of past abuses can be forgotten and remembered at later time. People sometimes do create false memories of experiences they never had. There is not a complete understanding of how accurate and flawed memories are formed. And then finally, this is not hyperlinked. I do not know why. There are two different types of amnesia that you need to remember. There is your anterograde amnesia and your retrograde. If I went and let's see, let's go back like that really quick, go up. Let me do that, and let me do that. And let's go back to boom. Let's see where this takes us.
That look. That look is a look that can only happen by a roaring fire at a verbal cabin.
Oh, we're not going to watch this. Never mind. This is 11 minutes. This is something that I did in class. So these are going to be movies on anterograde and retrograde amnesia. So anterograde amnesia, if you think about 50 First Dates or the movie The Vow. So this is the type of amnesia that occurs when, let's say, an accident occurs and you are like a blank slate every day. So you wake up every day and you don't remember the day before, but you remember everything prior to the accident. So all of your long-term memories for the past, you remember, but you can't make any new memories because that area in your temporal lobe, the hippocampus, that is responsible for your long-term memories, it's damaged. And then retrograde, so anterograde is new memories can be made. And then retrograde amnesia is memories that from the past. You cannot remember your past memories. So, excuse me, anterograde is 50 First Dates. Retrograde would be like the movie The Vow. So in that movie, Rachel McAdams and, oh my gosh, what's his name? He's adorable. He was in Magic Mike. Oh, you know, Channing Tatum. Oh, can't believe I almost forgot. So they were married, happy, everything. And then they had a car accident and then she could not remember her past. So it's the opposite. So retro means before and antero means after. So you want to remember that. And of course, a lot of that is sports injury related to. Here's some famous cases. HM is a famous case, most extensively studied amnesic patient in history. Onset of seizures from an accident led to amnesia. That was unresponsive to medication. As a last resort, he opted for an experimental surgery. Removal of the temporal lobes, including the hippocampus. Hippocampus is in your temporal lobe, and it looks like a seahorse. He developed profound anterograde amnesia and milder retrograde, so he unfortunately suffered from both types of amnesia. So your role of hippocampus, essential for creating new explicit memories, but not necessarily your implicit ones. Let's see, biology memory, a lot of this has to do with Alzheimer's disease. You want to make sure that when you are, especially when you retire, that you keep your brain active and you keep remembering information because that is one of the contributors and genetics of Alzheimer's disease. So nature and nurture, why Alzheimer's? Although we still don't have a solid understanding of really what causes this degenerative disorder, we do know that there is a definite genetic biological inheritance. We also know that factors such as diet, exercise can influence the development and progression of the disease. All right, so this goes back to Clive Waring. And that is it. So kept that at around 30 minutes, maybe a little bit over. So again, go back and re-listen to anything that I said. You want to know this because that is something that you're going to see on your midterm. So as always what I say. I'll see you next time and peace.